Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Okay. Sounds like we're good to go. Welcome. So, understanding how your customers view your products can have a profound impact on your business. In today's dynamic and disruptive marketplace, enterprises must implement an outside-in perspective when building APIs to not only stay relevant with their customers, but to also support the successful delivery of applications and digital experiences throughout their entire life cycle. That is what we are going to be covering today. Okay, so my name is Chris Hood. I am a digital engagement lead and strategist with Google Cloud and Apogee. And before we get started, I just wanted to let you know my address is here, my email address. Feel free to write that down. We will have some time at the end of today's presentation to hopefully get to some of your questions. But if you don't, then feel free to email me personally, and I will be happy to respond and assist in the best way I can. Okay? So let's get into this. One thing I always love to share with customers when I'm discussing the outside-in perspective is this quote from a great guy. I know him very well. But he says, "Believing you know what your customers want more than they do will cost you those customers." But it's not just me who says this. Let's actually look at some stats to kind of prove this out. Today we see that customers are more curious. What do we mean by that? Well, customers visit new brands, they research products, they read reviews, they even do price matching multiple times before making a purchase. In fact, 49% of digital consumers research a brand or a product maybe 2 or 4 times before actually converting. They are curious. They want to know about your brands, and they do the research to find it. Customers are also more demanding today. Digital consumers are looking for companies that are innovative, that align with their own technical profiles, the things that make them who they are. And they tend to be attracted to enterprises that try to impress them or create those personalized experiences based on their specific demands. In fact, 66% of digital consumers say it takes more to impress them today than ever before. And 65% expect personalized experiences because they are more demanding. Also, customers are more impatient. At Google, we do a lot of research around this, right? And we found that about 51% of digital consumers don't believe companies meet their expectations. And 53% of online visits to any business are abandoned if the mobile experience takes longer than 3 seconds to load. That's not a lot of time, right? But the real eye-opener is what consumers will do after poor experiences. 92% of digital consumers say they would stop purchasing from a company after 3 or fewer poor experiences. They are impatient. So how do we keep up with all of these demands and expectations? Well, this one stat pretty much summarizes what I was just saying in the quote. 76% of digital consumers expect companies to know their needs before even asking them. Now, how do you do that? How are we to ever keep up with that type of demand? Well, let's start by actually defining what an outside-in perspective is. The outside-in perspective is, first and foremost, a design and development philosophy. It focuses on the overall digital experience of customers, starting with how they view products and services on the outside of your company before flowing inward to connect with your business processes and data systems. That's what we are going to base this entire webinar on, is understanding this perspective. But in reality, we often see a challenge where business teams and technology teams do not communicate with each other. In these organizations, the IT teams are tasked with defining and designing and developing APIs based on maybe the technical architecture currently available or data services they believe that need to be exposed. This approach is what we call an inside-out perspective. Ultimately, the outside-in perspective is a mindset shift for a lot of organizations. It actually means breaking down the barriers between your teams and coming together to produce those new digital experiences that your consumers are demanding. Today, we're going to look at the outside-in perspective just a little differently. Here on the screen right now, you'll see a fairly standard software development lifecycle. You should pretty much all be familiar with this, right? And I think it makes sense that when we talk about design, this is a pretty easy phase for especially the business people on the line to understand. Maybe some of the technical people can understand it as well, right? The objective of the design phase is to transform requirements and stories into the digital experiences which meet the demands of our stakeholders. That's exactly what this phase does inside of a software development lifecycle. But again, I want to look at this a little differently with you, right? Why do some enterprises only address an outside-in perspective on the design phase? In reality, the entire life cycle should be focused on transforming customers' expectations into digital experiences. So today, we're going to break down each one of these phases in a typical development life cycle and discuss how that outside-in perspective can help your organization transform customer expectations and be able to meet those demands and ultimately bring value to your business. Because obviously, happy customers equals organizational value. I think that's something we can all wrap our heads around, right? Okay, so let's dive into the first phase, analyzing requirements from the outside in. I'm going to start by assuming that everyone knows what an API is, right? Everybody on this call, on this webinar right now, I think you all understand what APIs are. However, you should also understand that APIs are leading digital transformation today. Accepting this key concept will help you analyze what you need to build for your customers. APIs are helping companies create new connected experiences. They help enterprises become more agile and meet customer demands more quickly. And APIs are also opening up new business models and opportunities for collaborating with partners and monetizing those digital assets. APIs aren't just a way to interface or connect systems. Again, that's more of that inside-out perspective. This is how it all comes together, really. It's called the digital value chain. This is the foundation for the outside-in perspective. It demonstrates how digital products and experiences will flow from your consumers to your back-end systems. We accomplish this through building apps and new digital experiences by developers who consume your APIs, that are produced by API teams, and that are connected to your back-end, and then it flows all the way back to your consumers. But the outside-in approach also focuses on two primary consumers, your end users or your customers, as well as your application developers or the API consumers. Both need to be happy, and we get requirements from both. We tend to have several of these customers and stakeholders that we have to keep happy beyond the customers or beyond the consumers, right? We have consumers that want to engage with your products and experiences. We have both internal and external developers who want to learn about your APIs and get involved in who are going to produce those products. We got to keep them happy, because if they're not happy, they're not creating experiences for us. We have our API team that has to actually evangelize and grow and develop that community. And of course, we have stakeholders, our C-level executives and leaders that are defining business objectives and KPIs. Clearly, we need to make them happy as well. So in making all of these individuals happy, we also have to be able to capture their requirements. And we can do that through a whole lot of different types of activities. But knowing what they want, expect, need, along with the problems you're attempting to solve, plus keeping those developers happy, right? All of this is part of the process of creating digital experiences from an outside-in perspective. And we can do this by participating in events or engaging with your community, building internal teams, right, to help you define the requirements of what you want to build through various activities. Let me give you an example. Ticketmaster, one of our customers, they built an entire platform based on building a community with people and partners to grow their API program. They've got distribution partners, they've got certified partners, they've got startups and developers, all of them kind of working collaboratively to build API applications and new pieces of code. And by working together, they can then capture new requirements that are needed to iterate and grow their APIs. So what's the difference? When we look specifically at the analysis requirements gathering phase, the inside-out perspective says enterprise will build independent lists of requirements in siloed teams based on their own personal assumptions. The outside-in perspective says that the enterprise values customer input, and they centralize that backlog of requirements based on what the market is demanding. Do you see the slight difference in those? Okay, let's move on. Let's look at the next phase, user-centric design. Again, this is probably the most common conversation around outside in. But for this perspective, let's also consider that APIs need to be products. You need to treat APIs just like you would any other product within your organization. API products should have a life cycle as well, focusing on design and documenting and even marketing those APIs, and then analyzing them, again, to iterate and improve the APIs. This life cycle creates API products, just like any other product that you might have within your organization. And when we design API products, we know that top digital enterprises unite the technical and business teams into product teams and then empower those teams to drive impact. You design user experiences first, then design APIs that empower developers to build those experiences. And you can discover new business models and create new experiences rapidly, regardless of the back-end systems. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later when we get into some of the later phases. But this is all part of the design phase, right? So one way you could approach this is creating a persona. We create personas for everything else. Why not create personas for APIs? In this case, we've got an existing customer named Christina, and she has her own personal motivations and goals, even frustrations. We've got a little bio about Christina, so we kind of get an idea of what this existing customer wants. We can then take this persona and apply it to an API map. And mapping the APIs can help us visualize the digital experience from the outside in. For instance, with this map, both the business and technology participants can see where the APIs make sense, right? We can just follow it along. In this case, Christina sees a credit card offer. There's an API for that, right? Starts the application process. And as we progress, we get to a decision model. And we can see what happens if the card is approved or if the credit card is declined. And then they get the new card with a discount applied, right? Each one of these steps is part of defining what Christina expects and demands. And it allows the teams to then build APIs to meet those digital experiences. API design needs to be understandable, useful, credible, and available. You have to be able to remove complexity. APIs should be clear enough to understand that app developers can look at it and know exactly what it does. You should ensure documentation is easy to follow. You should support reusability so developers can rapidly iterate as consumers need change. You should keep your delivery and support consistent. Be open and honest through reliable APIs that nurture developer relationships. And centralize APIs, maybe using a portal, right, to support your API-first vision, reduce time to market, and foster collaboration through the entire organization. I'm going to show you another example. We've got Walgreens, again, another customer. So Walgreens built an entire set of API products around specific brands and lines of business. So they have photo prints, they have different types of digital offers, a rewards API, and prescriptions, refill and transfer for all of their medical services. These are specific lines of businesses. They've productized those, and then they release them off so that other API consumers and partners, other websites can engage with them and grow their API program and directly bring value back to the business through API products. Another example here is AccuWeather. And AccuWeather, just some stats for you. Within 10 months of launching their dev portal, AccuWeather's developer portal had attracted more than 24,000 developers, and they issued 11,000 API keys, generating hundreds of paid API product packages. And you can't really probably see it on the screenshot, but in each one of these, they are actually packages. They've productized their APIs, they've packaged them, and then they monetize those APIs through various partnerships. And each one, limited trial, has a set amount, and then they've got the standard amount, the prime amount, et cetera, and there's pricing packages for each one of those. This is just one way that you can design your APIs and then, again, monetize them. So, again, what's the difference here? From a design phase, the inside-out enterprise designs APIs around internal systems that they would like to expose, or the outside-in is enterprise designs APIs around customer experiences they want to create. Again, some subtle differences there, but hopefully this starts to make sense to you. So let's talk about the developers, who, as we said earlier, are your customers as well. So as we discussed earlier, our developers, our customers, they are the API consumers. And both internal and external customers should be treated in the same way. You should create developer experiences that help developers create those digital experiences that drive business value. You should have reusable code that can reduce time to market, thus making the developer experience easier. And developers will also help you drive that outside-in perspective on behalf of the enterprise. because they will ultimately supply you feedback. They will share requirements. They will share their personal needs, expectations, hopes, and they will also communicate what they are hearing from customers in terms of what their problems are and where pain points are and how you want to then build new apps to support those. And there are also a couple of different types of API products. So we just talked previously about how do we design API products. Now, from a development perspective, when we have different types of API products, it also kind of demonstrates the different types of developers that we may have as well. You could have public APIs, an API that is available really to anyone to consume. An example of this might be, say, store locations API, where that data really isn't proprietary, right? It's not confidential. You want people to know where your store locations are, so you may have an API that shares that information publicly. We also have private or partner APIs. These are APIs that are typically available only to a select group of people, whether they're private groups or partners. And we might see this as an example, like an inventory API for a specific partner. It's only their inventory, and we only want them to be able to access their inventory. Or you might also have internal API products, and these are APIs that are only available within the enterprise, as an example, like an HR API that has access to employee information. Now, with having these different types of API products, you potentially also have application developers who are producing applications using these API products, both publicly, both privately, and both internally. We talked a little bit about making the process faster by having reusable code. And so we get a better idea of this with different types of shared flows within Apigee. An example might be security, logging, mediation. All of these can be packaged in a way and then reused so that as people are developing new applications, they don't have to reuse or they don't have to reinvent everything. They don't have to go through the security process again. All they have to do is introduce an already approved reusable snippet, shared flow of code, and security is done, or logging is done, just as an example. Reusable code is a great way to help you meet the demands of your consumers as quickly as possible, or produce new code or new applications, new digital experiences faster and get to market faster. And all of this can be also demonstrated in Kohl's, another example of one of our customers, where they built an entire API library around different capabilities that they had. So I mentioned before, like an inventory API, and they have an inventory API that's helping to improve store product availability, inventory shipping. Customer satisfaction is more accurate because the inventory details are more accurate. So they focused on building products, API products, that met those different capabilities, which, again, help all of their partners and help all of the consumers of APIs to be able to build digital experiences faster. Okay? And really what this boils down to is if happy customers equal organizational value, then happy developers equals obtaining organizational value faster. That's how we need to look at it from a development perspective. And how do we create great developer experiences, enable self-service, offer feedback loops, use metrics. An example, enable self-service to make it extremely easy to get started and reduce the time it takes for an application developer to receive a valid response from your APIs. You can do this by documentation or sample code, even have a sandbox to play in, right? Have feedback loops, treat your internal and external teams the same, supporting them both equally, and listening to what they have to say. That is the key here. If you just assume that you know what they want, right? And then, of course, use the metrics to also drive iteration, capture, track, and actually look at that data. Make adjustments to your APIs and to your overall API program based on what the data tells you. Because again, if we keep the developers happy, then they can keep our customers happy. And when we keep our customers happy, we receive business value. Another thing that you can do is start thinking like a marketer. We have what we call the 5 E's of engagement: excite, empower, entrust, engage, enable. Is a typical funnel, right? Simple funnel. We can start with, say, an anonymous developer. How will you excite them to become a registered developer? And once they do register, do you empower them with more information and access so that they can start to build something for you? And then when they get a key, you've now entrusted them to help you in your digital journey. And you should continue to engage, helping them build new experiences for your business. And finally, enable them with the opportunity to grow your API program more. Let them be an influencer of your APIs. This is a traditional marketing approach, and it is fueled by that outside-in perspective. So what's the difference here? Inside out, teams develop APIs with complex integrations for internal workflows, or the outside in, which you need to focus on. Teams develop reusable APIs that hide complexity and simplify your processes. That's what you want to reach. Okay. How about testing? You're all testing your APIs, right? Sure you are. So how do we test APIs? Some of the traditional ways, right? Unit testing, vulnerability testing, integration, performance testing. We do this on our APIs. All that makes sense, right? But have you considered usability testing? I know that sounds like some crazy thought. But how do your developers look at your APIs from either a functional or a usable view? If you were to take an API that you built internally and actually give it to somebody, do they have questions? Do they understand it? Is it easy to access? All these things we've talked about. And when your APIs do get integrated, are you also testing if the digital experience your APIs produce meet the expectations of your consumers end to end? This is where we are introducing now the outside-in perspective as it relates to testing. We can also introduce governance into this equation. The goal of API governance is to manage risk while enabling speed to market. By having a set of standards that are already predefined, you can empower your developers to produce new digital experiences faster. That's what all of this really boils down to, right? And then by leveraging continuous delivery and integration, which we'll get into in just a moment, you can improve your overall testing and release continuously to meet consumer demands as they evolve. Governance is a critical piece of this. We're not talking about just releasing stuff willy-nilly. We actually want to be able to control that, but control it in a way that still allows us to get to market as quickly as possible. Governance. Let's take a typical test scenario here, where we've got Apogee between a client and a target system. And on top of that, Apogee might be doing some type of service call out to another third-party system. So what should we be testing here in this scenario? Well, what we are looking to do is test the API resource interactions and be able to track the behavior and data for each of those interactions. So, for example, a behavior is traffic management or OAuth handshake or some particular target API, third-party API. An example of data are things like error codes, response payloads, the structure, value of individual elements. And we have policies in place in Apogee that will help in this process. There's actually a ton of policies. And each one of these policies can actually be leveraged to help you with your testing. For instance, traffic management, whether it's quota or spike arrest, can give you some performance options. And those performance options are allowing you to meet, again, the expectations of your consumers who, as we learned earlier, will leave if your website or mobile experience takes longer than 3 seconds. Maybe some caching will help in that performance. We talk about security, tons of stuff in security to implement from a policy perspective for vulnerability testing and to ensure that nothing in your APIs have any vulnerabilities. Mediation to help with integration, JSON to XML, XML to JSON, right? Transformation. All of this can be part of the integration testing that you're doing. And then we even have some opportunities for unit testing, right? Java callouts, Python, different types of service callouts. All of these policies are inside of Apogee, again, to help you with testing. And in theory, all of these align with usability testing. Does it do what your consumers hope, expect them to do? And then underneath all of this is governance. By having these policies in place, you are already setting out what you want to be able to control to facilitate. So here again, what's the difference? Inside out, APIs are tested for internal compliance and quality assurance checks, where the outside in, APIs are tested for usability and performance with automated governance. In theory, you shouldn't really need to be testing for compliance if your governance has already been put into place to automate that testing. Make sense? Okay, how about deployment? Let's look at simple outside-in deployment pipelines. So most companies are faced with this challenge, right? The rate of change and updates at the ESB layer, your systems of record is slow, often taking months or even longer in some cases. It's very hard to update those back-end systems, and you can't keep up with the customer demands because it takes too long for your back-end systems to be updated. While at the top, your customers, right, are expecting those new digital experiences to be available in days in some cases. All of the connected devices, Internet of Things, communities. And again, it's not just customers. Your employees are expecting the same thing. Your partners are expecting the same thing. So we have this concept of two-speed IT. where the pace of change is hard for organizations to be able to balance between what your back-end systems can do and what your front-end expectations are. So this is where Apogee comes in. Apogee offers all of these ways that you can scale and secure and manage, analyze, connect between the two of these. This is how we're able to produce applications quicker. And so this goes then into how do we promote APIs? And not only that, can we promote or deploy our APIs in a way that supports adoption and self-service? This kind of chart right here shows you an approach. It's kind of a standardized cloud approach. You could also do this on-prem. So as you can see, we've got a couple of different orgs. We've got a non-prod org with 3 environments called dev, test, and perf, for performance testing. And we have a production org with 5 environments. Those are called stage, UAT for user acceptance testing, mock, sandbox, and prod. And those last 3 can directly help your API consumers get onboarded and begin building new digital experiences. If you go back to that funnel that I was showing you, where if you have an anonymous user, maybe that anonymous user can only access your mock environment. And as they register, now they have access to your sandbox. And once they begin to produce an application for you, they can get promoted to production. That's a basic concept here. While governance is also helping you on the back end, ensuring that as you're deploying your APIs across these environments, you have better controls, again, to help you get to that market faster. And then we have continuous integration and continuous delivery that is going across all of this. So let's break down these terms. I'm hoping that most of you understand what continuous integration and continuous delivery are, but in case you don't, a couple of quick definitions for you. Continuous integration: automate, build, and test workflows on changes to source code and merge those changes regularly to detect problems early and often. And then continuous delivery is to make the release process safe, low risk, and quick. Requires continuous integration. You can automate the deployments across multiple environments and targets. Right. Basically what they are. And we can see that in kind of a basic example here, continuous integration and delivery, where you've got a developer who's committing a change. It can be integrated automatically, merged, right? We can do unit testing here. We can build a release candidate and then continuously deliver it. And we can deliver that over all of our different environments, test, QA, production, however you have that set up. But why are we doing this again? The whole point of CI/CD is to help us ensure that we are maintaining our compliance through governance and being able to distribute APIs to our API consumers as quickly as possible, which then in turn allows them to create those digital experiences for us that our consumers are asking for. It all begins to come together. So what is the difference here? From an inside-out perspective, teams deploy APIs through environments that align with their processes, where from an outside-in perspective, APIs are deployed using CI/CD with environments that actually support growth and adoption. So how does your business rank? All of you who are on the phone with us, you're probably sitting here wondering, how do I know what we're doing? Or you may even be saying, you know what, we already do this. Which, if you are, that's great. I applaud you. But how do you know? How do you know how you're really ranking? We have a tool called the Apogee Compass, and it's a way for you to assess your business across 10 different dimensions of digital transformation. You can look at it from self-service and the platform, your software development lifecycle. How do you manage metrics, funding, leadership? Are you producing APIs that are products? And of course, the outside-in perspective. The vision piece of this, which is here on the right, you'll see is all about APIs and building a platform to support this and what your ecosystem strategy is. But the outside in is asking the simple question, do you see yourselves the way your customers and partners do? I think the key in all of these conversations and all of these different phases really boils down to that. Have you aligned your organization throughout the entire software development lifecycle by combining both your IT and business teams into groups that focus solely on understanding what your customers are asking for? And if you can do that, then you've mastered the outside-in perspective. So, with that being said, I'm going to open it up. We actually have a little bit of time, but I'm happy to open it up for any questions. I see that there are some questions coming in. I'll read through some of these here if we can real quickly to see. I've got one question, and the question simply is, why? 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 I hopefully have answered that question. If I haven't answered that question, then I may need to rethink this entire presentation. But the why is definitely, if I was to summarize this, is you have customers that are expecting things from you, from your business, how they engage with you, how personalized that engagement is, what that experience is. You all on this webinar right now are all customers of other products. How many times have you gone into, say, the grocery store and went to pay with your debit card, and the checkout line or the debit card machine isn't functioning properly? Are you all just like, oh, well, it's technology? Or do part of you get annoyed? I mean, you all have your own personal experiences and expectations. Leverage those in how do you make decisions for your own businesses. Okay? Let's see, next one here we've got, how can we get a copy of your slides? That's a great question. We will find a way to make those available for you. I'm happy to do that. You could also just email me, chrishood@google.com. Feel free. Email me and I'll send those to you. But I'll work with the team and we'll find a way that we can publish these. The webinar is also being recorded, so we can share a link to the recording and get that out to you. And then feel free to share that link with other coworkers or people that you think might be interested. And yes, same one. Will the slides be available? Yes, we will make that happen. Let's see, next one here. Could you please explain the difference between domain-driven design thinking and outside-in design? So I'm not entirely positive what you mean by domain-driven design, but I do know that there is a lot of other types that I think you're referring to, such as behavioral design. We talked about user-centric design. Really, all of those are the same. The concept is that we want to understand, when we talk about domains such as like the problem domain or the solutions domain, we want to understand what the problem is. And typically, we understand what that problem is by understanding what our customers or consumers want, and then we build solutions to solve those problems within that domain. It's really no difference. The key here, as part of this webinar, is that we do see a lot of organizations looking at design from an inside-out perspective, meaning we've got this data, we've got these systems, let's expose them. Let's make APIs out of this data that we have, without even really understanding if consumers want that data or need that data or care about it, or if you can build an experience to support that data. So we always say, instead of looking at what you have inside and building that outward and just kind of like, if we build it, they will come, take a different approach. Actually find out what your consumers want or need, expect, and then try to figure out how do you build that inside. Make sense? And then here's one more question. What is the difference between Apogee and an ESB? So high-level, Apogee is a gateway. It's a tool by which you can produce APIs, API proxies that connect to your ESB or your backend. Sometimes you might have something like, you might even have microservices on your ESB. But what Apogee does as a gateway is all of the other things, right, such as security, such as analytics and metrics, so that you can actually see who's consuming those APIs and how do you restrict or manage them, which is when we get into the productization. You definitely want to productize those APIs as opposed to just kind of distributing them as microservices. So that's the primary. There's a lot of information on our community. So feel free to take some time, go to the community. This question is very popular and out there. You can see a lot of different documentation on it. So feel free and do that. Okay, let's see. Any more questions? It's looking like we are at the end of our questions, which is great. And we're at the end of the presentation. So real quick, in summary here, thank you. Appreciate your time and opportunity to share with you this outside-in perspective. Again, as I mentioned, we will make the video of the webinar available. So feel free to look for the link and then share that link with coworkers, your executives. And as I mentioned earlier, my email is chrishood@google.com. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions, or if you would like to talk more about this perspective or any of the other topics that we covered here today. Thank you again for everyone's time and energy and efforts, and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.